Welcome to our explainer on Dr. Jason Fung's foundational work, The Obesity Code. Let's jump right in, because today we're going to completely dismantle pretty much everything you thought you knew about weight loss. If you've ever been super frustrated by conventional diet advice, when the standard rules just don't seem to add up, you're in exactly the right place. We're going to look at historical data, biological facts, and some seriously glaring inconsistencies in modern nutritional dogma. Let's do this. So, here's a wild question to kick things off. Why are there fat doctors? It's a real paradox, right? Doctors are the ultimate authorities on human physiology. They literally know the science of the human body inside and out. Plus, just getting through medical school and residency takes an insane amount of self-discipline. So, if weight loss is simply a matter of knowledge and willpower like we've always been told, why do highly disciplined, highly educated medical experts still struggle with obesity? It just doesn't make sense. Unless, of course, the conventional advice they're following is fundamentally broken. Which brings us to a massive blind spot in the medical profession. Section 1. Treating symptoms, not causes. We really need to talk about how modern medicine approaches complex diseases, because the field has unfortunately fallen into a huge trap. Rather than looking for the root cause of an illness, we've become incredibly adept at just reactively treating symptoms. Think about type 2 diabetes, for example. Doctors routinely prescribe insulin to lower high blood sugar, which is a symptom, even though they know full well that prescribing insulin will actually cause the patient to gain weight, thereby making the root problem even worse. We're basically treating the smoke, but completely ignoring the fire. And what's the standard treatment for obesity? Eat less, move more. I mean, it sounds perfectly reasonable, doesn't it? It obeys the laws of thermodynamics. But here's the stark, uncomfortable reality. It is a complete and utter failure for virtually everyone who tries it. By every objective measure, prescribing calorie reduction as the main treatment for obesity just hasn't worked. We spent decades and literally billions of dollars pushing this exact message, and yet the obesity epidemic is only accelerating. And the really crazy part is how we frame this failure. Because the whole calories in versus calories out model seems so logical to us. When a patient fails to lose weight, we don't blame the treatment, we blame the patient. This model dangerously reframes a complex medical condition into a personal failing. It's what we call the calorie deception. We basically accuse overweight folks of gluttony for eating too much and sloth for exercising too little. Literally 2 of the 7 deadly sins. We take a biological disease that desperately needs real investigation, and we just reduce it to a simple character defect. To break out of this trap, we need a totally new framework. Section 2. Proximate versus ultimate causes. This concept is absolutely crucial to Dr. Fung's argument. You really have to understand the difference between a proximate cause and an ultimate cause. The proximate cause is what is immediately responsible for an event, but the ultimate cause, that's what actually started the whole chain of events in the first place. If you want a real, lasting solution to any complex problem, you simply cannot stop at the proximate cause. You have to trace it all the way back to the root. Let's use an analogy to make this crystal clear. Say a plane crashes. Why did it crash? Well, the proximate cause is that there wasn't enough lift to overcome gravity. I mean, that's undeniably true, right? But is that actually helpful? If we just treat the proximate cause, we tell engineers, hey, build larger wings to generate more lift. But obviously, that won't stop plane crashes. We need to look at the ultimate causes, things like human error, a mechanical fault, or really bad weather. Fixing those underlying issues, maybe with better pilot training or stricter maintenance schedules, that is how you actually solve the problem. Here's another one, just to really hammer this home. Why is a boat sinking? Proximate cause, gravity is stronger than buoyancy. Solution, lighten the boat by frantically scooping water out. It's exhausting, and the second you stop scooping, the boat starts sinking again. But what's the ultimate cause? The boat has a massive hole in the hull. The only lasting meaningful solution is to patch the hole. Treating the proximate cause is just never a lasting solution. Now let's apply this exact same logic to obesity. What causes weight gain? Proximate cause, consuming more calories than you expend. Yes, technically true. But if that's just the proximate cause, what is the ultimate cause? What's actually driving that caloric imbalance? The unspoken assumption in modern medicine is that the ultimate cause is just personal choice. We assume people simply choose to overeat. But is it really a sudden collective lack of willpower across the globe, or is it something much, much deeper? Before we answer that, consider this wild stat. 61%. According to a 2012 poll, 61% of U.S. adults erroneously believe that personal choices about eating and exercise are the ultimate cause of the obesity epidemic.
And honestly, this is exactly why we see so much discrimination against obese people. We pity them and we judge them based on this comforting illusion that we are entirely in control of our caloric intake through sheer willpower alone.
But the biological evidence completely blows the personal choice myth out of the water. Just look at hormones. Before puberty, boys and girls have roughly the same body fat percentage. But after puberty, women average about 50% more body fat than men. And that's despite the fact that men generally consume way more calories. Are adult women just suddenly lazier and more gluttonous than men? Of course not. The hormonal cocktail of puberty differentiates them. Same goes for pregnancy. It induces significant, inevitable weight gain. This is driven entirely by hormonal changes, not some sudden drop in personal willpower. Hormones dictate fat accumulation, period.
So if it's not a sudden moral failing, what actually changed? Section 3. A brief history of fattening. To figure this out, we need to take a quick journey back in time to see exactly how our understanding of diet got so incredibly derailed. See, throughout most of history, we actually knew exactly what made us fat. Way back in 1825, Brillat Savarin wrote that floury and starchy substances were the main cause of obesity. In 1863, William Banting published a super successful pamphlet detailing his massive weight loss. And how did he do it? Simply by avoiding bread, milk, beer, sweets, and potatoes. For over a century, the medical consensus was clear: refined carbohydrates are fattening. But then the 1950s hit, and a perceived epidemic of heart disease changed the game entirely. In the 1950s, panic set in because seemingly healthy men were suddenly dropping dead of heart attacks. But take a look at the causes of death in 1900 versus 1960. Those infectious diseases, they were huge in 1900, but they shrank massively by 1960, all thanks to things like vaccines and antibiotics. Because people were no longer dying young from tuberculosis or pneumonia, they were actually living long enough to develop heart disease. It wasn't necessarily some crazy new dietary epidemic, it was largely just a byproduct of increased life expectancy. But all great stories need a villain, right? So, based on some highly enthusiastic, but honestly very shaky science, dietary fat was cast as the ultimate bad guy causing this so-called heart disease epidemic. The demonization of dietary fat began in earnest. But this created a huge physiological dilemma. If you tell an entire population to drastically cut back on dietary fats, they have to replace those calories with something else. And you can't easily increase protein without also increasing fat, since meat and dairy naturally contain both. So totally inadvertently, lowering fat required people to eat significantly more carbohydrates. And this brings us to a monumental turning point. Section 4, the 1977 Dietary Guidelines. This was the moment government intervention fundamentally and forever altered the global nutritional landscape. In 1977, the McGovern Committee released the dietary goals for the United States. They officially recommended cranking up carbohydrate consumption to almost 60% of our daily calories while slashing fat down to 30%. And the craziest part here? This was decided by a political committee, not by rigorous scientific discovery. In an instant, those formerly fattening carbohydrates were totally absolved of all their sins. Refined grains were literally rebranded as healthy whole grains, despite a complete lack of historical or scientific precedent.
Let's look at the direct aftermath of this. Section 5, Anatomy of an Epidemic. The results of these new dietary rules on the American public were, well, nothing short of catastrophic. Here is how this tragic chain reaction played out. Step 1, Americans actually listened. They dutifully tried to eat less fat and fewer eggs. But as we all know, fat equals flavor. So, step 2, food processors realized that low-fat food tastes like literal cardboard, and they compensated by dumping massive amounts of sugar into everything. Step 3, guided by that shiny new food pyramid, consumption of refined carbohydrates like bread, pasta, and potatoes just skyrocketed. And finally, step 4, an entirely untested, unprecedented, high-carb, low-fat diet took hold across the entire population. The tragic irony of it all is perfectly captured right here. Notice how the tracking of obese adults is relatively flat for decades, and then it suddenly shoots upward into the stratosphere. When exactly does that spike begin? Almost exactly in 1977. The precise moment the obesity epidemic exploded aligns perfectly with the official rollout of the low-fat, high-carb dietary guidelines. Heart disease didn't decrease like they promised, but obesity absolutely skyrocketed. Which brings us to a pretty sobering summary. The fatal conceit. We actually had the arrogance to believe that our political committees were somehow smarter than 200,000 years of Mother Nature and human evolution.
We turned our backs on the natural fats our bodies were perfectly adapted to handle, and we replaced them with highly processed, refined carbohydrates, all under the guise of heart health. And in doing so, we accidentally created the single greatest medical epidemic of our time.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought. If calories aren't the ultimate cause, and if reducing fat actually made us fatter, what actually causes weight gain? And what on earth can we do about it? Well, the evidence points entirely away from personal failure and calorie counting and points directly toward a new hormonal framework, specifically how our bodies react to those very carbohydrates we were told to eat. The secret to weight loss isn't your willpower, it's unlocking the code of your hormones. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this changes the way you look at your plate.